Start చేసవచ్చు. Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Narasimha, Assistant Professor Ophthalmology. In the next coming few classes, that is about 4 to 5 classes, I'm dealing with the cornea. I hope everyone is safe at your home. So coming to the cornea, what is cornea? It is a transparent avascular tissue with a smooth convex outer surface and concave inner surface, which resembles a small watch glass. So cornea looks like this. It has smooth convex outer surface and concave inner surface. It forms the 1/6 part of the outer coat of the eyeball. Remaining 5/6 is formed by the sclera. So this basically cornea is a transparent avascular structure with smooth convex outer surface and concave inner surface, which resembles a small watch glass. So coming to the dimensions of the cornea, dimensions and shape of the cornea, anterior surface, it is elliptical in shape and it is about 11.7 millimeters horizontal and 10.6 millimeters vertical. And posterior surface is circular in shape and it is about 11.7 millimeter in diameter. Both horizontal and vertical, it is 11.7 millimeters posteriorly. And whereas anterior surface is elliptical in shape and it is 11.7 millimeter horizontal and 10.6 millimeter diameter vertical. So coming to the shape of the cornea, the anterior surface is elliptical in shape, whereas posterior surface is circular in shape. So central 5 mm of the cornea is very important because we call it as an optical zone. It acts as a powerful refractive surface. In the eye, there are two refractive surfaces. One is cornea and other one is lens. The radius of curvature is around, anteriorly it is around 8 mm, posteriorly it is around 7 mm. Refractive index is 1.37. Refractive index means it is nothing but the change in the path of light when it travels from the vacuum to the any medium. So when the light passes from vacuum to the any medium, there is a change in the there is a refraction of light. That refraction of light, we call it as a refractive index. In the cornea, it is around 1.37 and refractive power is 42 diopters. So coming to thickness, centrally it is around 0.52 mm and peripherally it is around 0.67 mm to 1 mm. So central cornea is thin when compared with the peripheral cornea. And surface area is around 1.3 centimeters square. And the optical zone, previously I told you, central 5 mm we call it as optical zone. The central 1/3 is called optical zone. It is around 5.4 mm. It acts as a powerful refractive surface. Composition of human cornea, it is mainly consists of water. It is around 78%, and different collagen materials are present. In that, type 1 is of higher concentration, that is around 50 to 55%. Type 3 is around 1%, and type 4 collagen is around 8 to 10%, and type 6 is around 25 to 30%. So remaining constituents of composition of human cornea is proteins. There are around 5%. Keratin sulfate, it is around 0.7%. These are proteoglycans, which are around 0.7 to 0.3%, and remaining 1% is occupied by salts. So coming to the histology of cornea, behind the precorneal tear film, there are 5 layers of cornea. The first layer is, we call it as epithelium. Behind that, we see Bowman's layer and stroma, Descemet's membrane and endothelium. These are the 5 layers of the cornea. Anteriorly, epithelium, then Bowman's layer, stroma, Descemet's membrane and endothelium. So you can see in this picture, you can see the multi-layered epithelium followed by Bowman's layer, then stroma and Descemet's membrane and endothelium. So coming to the epithelium, it composed of 4 to 6 layers. Anteriorly 1 to 2 layers is occupied by superficial squamous cells. It's occupied by non-keratinized squamous cells. Then intermediate is around 2 to 3 layers. It consists of broad wing cells, and innermost layer consists of columnar cells. So epithelium is a multi-layered. Anteriorly we have non-keratinized squamous cells, and intermediate we have broad wing-shaped cells, and innermost layer is consists of columnar cells. The epithelium is around 40 to 50 microns. In the epithelium, there are tight junctions between the superficial epithelial cells, which prevents the penetration of tear film into the stroma. So this helps in maintaining the transparency of the cornea by preventing the entry of fluid into the epithelial layers, epithelial cells. It maintains the transparency of the cornea. So basically, epithelium is a multi-layered. Anteriorly, it consists of squamous cells, intermediate wing-shaped cells, and innermost columnar cells. Second layer is Bowman's layer. It is a structureless, and it is formed by condensation of superficial stroma. It is around 15 microns thickness, and unlike epithelium, when it is disrupted, it will not regenerate. So if there is any damage to the epithelium, there is a chance of regeneration of the epithelial cells. But whereas if there is any damage to the Bowman's layer, it will not regenerate, and it results in residual scar formation. So if there is any damage to the Bowman's membrane, there is a chance of formation of opacity in the cornea. So in the definition of the cornea, I have said that cornea is a avascular transparent structure. So in order to maintain the proper refraction of the eye, the cornea should be in transparent state. If there is any damage to the Bowman's layer, as it doesn't regenerate, it leads to opacity of the cornea. So next layer is stroma. It is around 500 microns thickness, and it constitutes about 90% of the total corneal thickness. It mainly consists of regularly arranged collagen bundles. This regular arrangement of collagen is important to maintain the transparency of the cornea. These collagen bundles lie in the proteoglycan ground substance, and along with this collagen and proteoglycan ground substance, we see keratocytes. We see the small population of keratocytes. These keratocytes are nothing but the flattened fibroblasts. The density and size of these keratocytes varies at the different depths of the stroma. The main function of the keratocytes is they digest and manufacture the stromal molecules. So these are the keratocytes. In this picture, you can see the keratocytes, and these are nothing but the flattened fibroblasts. So this is the epithelium, followed by Bowman's membrane, then stroma. These are the histological slides of keratocytes, and this is the stroma is followed by Descemet's membrane, then endothelial cells. So next layer is Descemet's membrane. Descemet membrane is a basement membrane of the corneal endothelium. It is of 3 micrometers at birth and increases in size to 10 to 12 micrometers in adulthood. So endothelium gradually lays a posterior amorphous non-banded zone. We call it as a pre-Descemet layer, a Dewars layer. This layer is important during surgeries like deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty. So Descemet's membrane is a highly elastic in nature. This is the strongest layer in the corneal tissues, and it has a property of regeneration. So both the epithelium and Descemet's membrane can regenerate, whereas the Bowman's membrane will not regenerate and results in scar formation. So highly resistant layer in the cornea is Descemet's membrane, and it also has a property of elasticity. So last layer is corneal endothelium. Unlike epithelium, corneal endothelium is a single layer, consists of interdigitated cells arranged in a mosaic pattern. So this is the confocal microscopic picture of endothelium. It is a single layer. These cells are arranged in a mosaic pattern. The endothelium helps in maintaining the corneal transparency by controlling the corneal hydration. So it prevents the influx of water into the cornea and helps in maintaining the transparency of the cornea. So coming to the endothelial cell density, the cell density decreases with the age at the approximate rate of 0.6% per year. The normal endothelial cell is around 5 lakhs, and at birth it is about 6,000 cells per millimeter square, and by 15 years the cell count decreases to 3,400 cells per millimeter square, and by 85 years, it decreases to 2,300 cells per millimeter square. The normal central endothelial cell count is 2,000 to 3,000. If the endothelial cell count falls up to 500 cells per millimeter square, it leads to corneal edema and loss of transparency of the cornea. So main function of the endothelium is in maintaining the corneal transparency. So with the age, the cell count decreases at the rate of 0.6% per year. At birth, it is around 6,000 cells per millimeter square, and by 15 years, the central endothelial cell count decreases to 3,400, and by 85 years, 2,300 cells per millimeter square. So 2,000 to 3,000 cells per millimeter square is a normal range. If it decreases to less than 2,000 and if it reaches to 500 cells per millimeter square, it leads to corneal edema and decreases transparency of the cornea. So basically, this is the histology of the cornea. It consists of 5 layers. Epithelium, it is a multi-layered, and the tight junctions present in the epithelium helps in prevention of influx of corneal tear film into the corneal stroma. And Bowman's membrane, it doesn't regenerate when there is any damage to the Bowman's layer. It leads to scar formation. And stroma, which constitutes about 90% of the cornea, they consist of keratocytes. These are nothing but flattened keratocytes, flattened fibroblasts, which helps in healing process. And it's followed by Descemet's membrane. It is a highly resistant and elastic layer, and it is the strongest layer of the cornea. And this is followed by single layered endothelium. There is an active pump in the endothelium which prevents the influx of fluid from inner layers into the cornea and helps in maintaining the normal transparency of the cornea. So this is the basic histology of the cornea. It consists of 5 layers. You have to remember that Bowman's membrane doesn't regenerate, and Descemet's membrane and epithelium can regenerate. And Descemet's membrane is the strongest layer which prevents the perforation of the cornea, and endothelium is a single layered and helps in preventing the influx of fluid into the cornea and maintaining the normal transparency of the cornea. So this is about the basic histology of the cornea. So coming to the embryology of the cornea, the formation of the cornea starts at the gestational age of 7th week. The corneal epithelium is derived from the surface ectoderm, and Bowman's membrane from the mesenchyma. Stroma is from both mesenchyma and neural crust. Descemet's membrane is inside from the endothelium, and endothelium is from neural crust. This is the basic embryology of the cornea. At the 7th week, the formation of cornea takes place. So nerve supply, anterior ciliary nerve from the ophthalmic division of the fifth cranial nerve, that is trigeminal nerve. This anterior ciliary nerve enters the cornea, and it is divided into 3 nerve plexus. The 3 nerve plexus are stromal plexus, subepithelial plexus, and intraepithelial plexus. So basically, the ophthalmic division of the 5th cranial nerve supply the cornea. So what is blood supply? Blood supply, as I told earlier, cornea is a avascular structure. So there is no blood supply to the cornea. So physiology, it's like it is a most actively metabolizing layers of the cornea are epithelium and endothelium. Like any other tissue, cornea requires energy for normal metabolic activities, as well as for maintaining the transparency and dehydration. So energy is generated by breakdown of glucose in the form of ATP. So main metabolizing layers of the cornea are epithelium and endothelium. So from where the oxygen is derived to cornea, mainly from the outside atmosphere and from tear film. And minor amounts is supplied by aqueous humor. Aqueous humor is nothing but the plasma-like fluid present in the chambers in the anterior chamber of the eye. This aqueous humor is secreted from the ciliary body. So this helps this aqueous supply minimal amount of oxygen to the cornea. And limbal vasculature. Limbus is nothing but the junction between the cornea and the conjunctiva. So whatever the vessels present at this zone also provide minimal supply of oxygen to the cornea. So basically, oxygen is mainly supplied from the outside atmosphere through tear film. And glucose is derived from the glucose, amino acids, vitamins, all the nutrients are derived to cornea by mainly by the aqueous humor, and lesser amounts by tears and limbal vessels. So this is reverse. The oxygen is mainly by the tear film and glucose is mainly by the aqueous. Different metabolic pathways involved in the cornea are HMP shunt, glycolysis, and Krebs and citric acid, Krebs or citric acid cycle. These are the different pathways for energy production in the energy production of the cornea. So this is the basic physiology of the cornea. So transparency of the cornea is very important for proper refraction. Corneal transparency is very important. So how this transparency is maintained in the cornea? It is by these 5 points. That is, first one is due to normal regular arrangement of the collagen bundles in the stroma. So if there is any irregular arrangement of the collagen bundles, it leads to opacity in the cornea. So by nature, the stromal collagen bundles are arranged regularly in the cornea. So this is the first point which helps in maintaining the transparency of the cornea. And second one is corneal epithelium and tear film. As I said earlier, the corneal epithelium consists of tight junctions, which prevents the influx of fluid into the anterior stroma. And the tear film also, it is of hypertonic nature. Because of the hypertonic nature of the cornea, it helps in maintaining the transparency of the cornea. And as I said earlier, that the cornea is a vascular tissue. So as there is no blood vessels, they doesn't disturb the transparency of the cornea. And whatever the nerve fibers present in the cornea are non-myelinated. If they are myelinated, they leads to opacity of the cornea. So so whatever the nerves present in the cornea are non-myelinated, and this also helps in the maintaining the transparency of the cornea. And hydration is controlled by the active pump mechanism in the corneal endothelium. So from the deeper layers, that is from the anterior chamber, this active pump which is present in the endothelium helps in preventing the influx of the aqueous into the corneal layers. So this helps in preventing the opacification of the cornea. So these are the 5 points which are very important to maintain the normal transparency of the cornea. So as I said, there is no blood vessels are there, and whatever the nerve fibers are non-myelinated. The corneal tight junctions in the corneal epithelium, hypertonic nature of the tear film, regular arrangement of the stromal lamella, and hydration controlled by the endothelium by active pump mechanism. That is sodium potassium ATPase pump mechanism, which helps in preventing the influx of fluid into the corneal stroma. So these are the 5 points which are important to maintain the corneal transparency. So functions of the cornea, it helps in transmission of light. As I said, it is a refractive surface like lens. It helps in transmission of light and helps in diffraction of the light. The refractive index is around 1.37. And as it's a part of the outer coat of the eyeball, like sclera, it helps in maintaining the structural integrity and protection of the inner layers from the infections. So these are the basic functions of the cornea: transmission of light, refraction, structural integrity, and protection. So this is about basic anatomy of the cornea. First, you have to remember is the layers of the cornea is important. That is, it has 5 layers: epithelium, Bowman's layer, stroma, Descemet's membrane, and endothelium. Different layers have different functions. Bowman's layer will not doesn't regenerate and leaves the scar when it is damaged. Stroma, it consists of keratocytes, which helps in healing process. And Descemet's membrane is a highly resistant layer and strongest layer. And endothelium has active pump mechanism which prevents the influx of fluid into the cornea and maintaining the transparency of the cornea. So physiology and corneal transparency and functions. So coming to the pathologies of the cornea, first I will deal with the inflammations of the cornea. In the inflammations of the cornea, first you should know the different the definition of different terms. First thing is, what is corneal erosion? As the name suggests, erosion is there is any damage to the superficial part. That is, if there is any loss of corneal epithelium or there is any epithelial defect without any inflammation. You have to remember that in the erosion, there is no inflammation. Only there is a damage to the epithelium. So we see only epithelial defect in case of corneal erosion, and we don't see any inflammation. that we call it as a corneal erosion. If there is next term is corneal ulcer. Ulcer, it consists of both epithelial defect, inflammation, and necrosis of the corneal tissue. So only epithelial defect, we call it as a erosion. If it consists of epithelial defect along with inflammation and necrosis of the tissue, we call it as a corneal ulcer. In keratitis, here we see inflammation, edema, and infiltration, and ciliary congestion. We may or may not see epithelial defect. In keratitis, any itis means is inflammation. So we see inflammation and infiltration of the inflammatory cells, and it leads to corneal edema and ciliary congestion. So whatever the ciliary vessels which are present surrounding the cornea are congested. So in this picture you can see the erosion, and this is a corneal ulcer. So classification of corneal ulcer. Corneal ulcer is a 10 marks question. It is important. And coming first, you have to write the classification. First, you have to write the definition of the ulcer, then classification. In the classification, morphologically, it is divided into two types: ulcerative keratitis and non-ulcerative keratitis. In the ulcerative keratitis, depending on the depth of the inflammation, as I said, ulcer means there is definitely inflammation is present. And depending on the depth of that inflammation, it is divided into superficial keratitis, where the only epithelium and Bowman's membrane is involved. Second one is deep keratitis. Here the stroma is involved, and ulcer with impending perforation. If you don't treat the corneal ulcer at this stage, deep keratitis, it leads to impending perforation of the cornea, and finally perforated corneal ulcer. So depending on the depth of the inflammation, it is superficial keratitis, deep keratitis, ulcer with impending perforation, and perforated ulcer. Next is depending on the presence of abscess. Suppuration is nothing but the abscess. We call it as a suppurative keratitis. The common examples are bacterial corneal ulcer, fungal corneal ulcer, and non-suppurative corneal ulcer. That examples are viral, chlamydial, and parasitic infections. So basically, in the ulcerative keratitis, depending on the depth of the inflammation and depending on the presence of suppuration, it is divided into suppurative keratitis and non-suppurative keratitis. Suppurative keratitis examples are bacterial and fungal. Non-suppurative examples are viral, chlamydial, and parasitic infections. So this is a superficial, which involves only epithelium and Bowman's layers, and deep ulceration, it also involves entire stroma. So depending on the location, it is divided into central corneal ulcer and peripheral corneal ulcers. And depending on the association of hypopion. Hypopion is nothing but the presence of pus in the anterior chamber. Because of the suppurative corneal ulcers, there is a dilatation of iris vessels, and that leads to exudation of fluid into the anterior chamber. This exudation consists of pus cells which accumulate at the inferior part of the inferior 1/4 of the cornea, and that we call it as a hypopion. Based on the presence or absence of the hypopion, we call it. If there is no hypopion, we call it as a simple corneal ulcer. If there is a hypopion, we call it as a hypopion corneal ulcer. So this is a picture of the corneal ulcer. Here, at this point, we can see the epithelial defect, and this white part is an infiltrate. This is the hypopion. This hypopion is present behind the cornea, that is in the anterior chamber. This hypopion is formed by the dilated ciliary and iris vessels. Because of the toxins released by the infective pathogen, that leads to dilatation of the iris and ciliary vessels, and this leads to exudation of proteins and pus cells. And because of the gravity, that they accumulate at the inferior 1/4 of the layer of 1/4 part of the cornea, and it appears like this. This we call it as a hypopion, and we see the congestion of the corneal conjunctival vessels. So this is about the location of the ulcer. Here we see that ulcer is present at the central 5 mm optical zone. That we call it as a central corneal ulcer. Here it is a paracentral, just outside the 5 mm zone, and this is the peripheral ulcer. So based on the location, central, paracentral, and peripheral. So this is about ulcerative keratitis. And coming to the non-ulcerative keratitis, it is divided into two types: superficial keratitis and deep keratitis. The examples of superficial keratitis are diffuse superficial keratitis and superficial punctate keratitis. And deep keratitis, it is of two types, non-suppurative and suppurative. In non-suppurative, examples are interstitial keratitis, disciform keratitis, and sclerosing keratitis. These things I will deal with the next classes, and just you see the names of the examples of the non-suppurative types. In that we have interstitial keratitis, disciform keratitis, and sclerosing keratitis. And second one is in the suppurative keratitis, we see central corneal abscess and posterior corneal abscess. In these types, we don't see any ulceration. Whereas in case of these types, we see ulceration, that is necrosis is present. So non-ulcerative keratitis is divided into two types: superficial keratitis and deep keratitis. So this is the morphological classification of the corneal ulcer. Coming to the etiological classification, based on infective, if it is a infective, it is of following types. Infective keratitis, it is caused by either bacteria or fungal, viral or protozoal or primordial. These are the common examples of corneal ulcers, infective corneal ulcers. And ulcers may occur secondary to the allergic conjunctivitis also. In case of vernal keratoconjunctivitis, fictional keratoconjunctivitis, and atopic keratoconjunctivitis, we see allergic keratitis. In case of vernal keratoconjunctivitis, we see the shield ulcers. Example, shield ulcer we see in the vernal keratoconjunctivitis. The allergy is a main cause. We call them as a allergic keratitis. If infective pathogen is a main cause, we call it as infective keratitis. And some systemic diseases like connective tissue disorders like SLE, autoimmune disorders like Sjogren's, pan, Wegener's granulomatous, we see corneal ulcers. They come under systemic diseases. And some skin diseases like acne rosacea, we see rosacea keratitis. And some tropic keratitis. Tropic keratitis is where there is a damage to the nerve supply. For suppose if there is damage to the facial nerve, we see exposure keratopathy because of the incomplete closure of the eyelids. There is a continuous exposure of cornea to the outer layers. It leads to exposure keratitis. And in case of fifth nerve lesions, that is, if there is any damage to the trigeminal nerve, there is a loss of sensation of the cornea, and it finally leads to drying and discussion of the cornea. So these are the examples of the tropic keratitis, where there is a damage to the nerve supply of the eyelids or cornea. And if the positive reason is trauma, we call it as a traumatic keratitis. It may be mechanical or thermal or chemical injuries. If we don't know the correct reason of the keratitis, we call it idiopathic. Example is Murren's corneal ulcer. So based on morphological and etiological, it is divided into, it is classified. If it is etiological classification, these are the examples of the etiological classification. Maybe infective or allergic, systemic diseases, skin-related diseases, tropic, trauma, or idiopathic. These are the classifications of the corneal ulcers. If the question arises as corneal ulcer, first we have to write the definition of the corneal ulcer, then classifications. So epidemiology. So corneal ulcers are common in developing countries. As India is a developing country where agriculture is the main occupation, routinely we see a lot of corneal ulcer cases. And with the use of contact lenses, if the contact lenses are not used properly, it also increases the incidence of the corneal ulcers. And these corneal ulcers are more and more, we see a lot of corneal ulcer at harvesting and rainy seasons, where agriculture is the main occupation. In rainy seasons, we see a lot of corneal ulcer cases. So coming to risk factors of the bacterial keratitis, first thing is there should be some trauma. With the trauma, there is a breach, there is a defect in there is a breach in the epithelium. Because of this breach in the epithelium, this helps in adherence or inoculation of the organism. If there is no damage to the epithelium, the infective pathogen will not enter into the corneal layers. There is because of the trauma. So trauma is one of the risk factors. Next is eyelid and adnexal diseases. Adnexia means very periocular surgery. It includes eyelids, eyebrows, lacrimal apparatus. The blepharitis. What is blepharitis? Is nothing but inflammation of the eyelids. Ectropenia is the outward deviation of the outward turning of the eyelid. Entropenia is the inward turning of the eyelids. Trichiasis means misdirection of the eyelashes. Normally the eyelashes are forwards and outwards. If there is any misdirection, that is they turn inwards, and there is a continuous rubbing of eyelashes over the cornea, and it leads to epithelial defects and eventually corneal ulcers. And lag of thalamus. What is lag of thalamus? It is nothing but incomplete closure of the eyelid. And chronic dacrocystitis. If there is any inflammation or infection of the lacrimal apparatus, the secretions from these lacrimal apparatus may act as a source of infection and may eventually cause the corneal ulcers. So if there is any eyelid or adnexal diseases, it acts as a risk factor for the corneal ulcers. And if there is any disturbed tear film, so normal tear production is important. In order to maintain the moist state of the eye, the normal tear production is important. So if there is any ocular surface disorders like dry eye or Stevens-Johnson syndrome, it's a mucus, skin and mucus membrane disorder, and if there is any ocular burn, there is any thermal burn, or if there is any bullous keratopathy, this leads to disturbed tear film and eventually may cause corneal ulcers. And improper usage of contact lenses, improper usage of non-hygienical usage of contact lenses, and usage of corticosteroids for a prolonged period, because these corticosteroids are immunosuppressants. They increases the chances of infection. Because of suppression of the immunity, they may increase the chance of infection. And even secondary to the any ocular surgery, that is a secondary to the any LASIK or any cataract surgery, there is a chance of bacterial keratitis. So these are the risk factors of bacterial keratitis. They come under local, and systemic causes are malnutrition and diabetes, steroids, AIDS, and malignancies. So in immunocompetent patients, it is common. So contact lens users, what are the reasons for the incidence of corneal ulcers in contact lens users? First one is negligence. Because of negligence, they don't properly maintain the contact lens in a hygienic manner, and usage of contact lens for a prolonged period. Normal usage, in the 24 hours, the contact lens should be worn for only maximum of 6 to 8 hours. And cleaning of contact lens with the tap water. There is a separate solution for the contact lenses. We should use that solution only. If you wash the contact lens with the tap water, and if you install the contact lens, there are a lot of pathogens, mainly acanthamoeba in the water. They leads to infection of the cornea and eventually corneal ulcers. So contamination of the contact lens. If you don't maintain the solution in a hygienic manner, it may lead to contamination of the contact lens solution, and this also acts as a source of one of the risk factors for the corneal ulcers. So proper hygienical usage of contact lenses is important in order to prevent the occurrence of corneal ulcers. So coming to the risk factors of fungal corneal ulcers, like bacterial causes, local causes are trauma with the vegetative matter. In case of fungal corneal ulcer, this is important. Vegetative matter is nothing but the tree branches or tree leaves or animal tail. It's all come under vegetative matter. So there should be definitely, there is this trauma with the vegetative matter should be present for the fungal corneal ulcers, and improper prolonged usage of steroids and antibiotics and old age. These are the risk factors for fungal corneal ulcers. And systemic are diabetes, immunosuppressive therapy, malignancies, and immunocompromised state. And viral, the risk factors are extreme, that old age and stress, trauma, malnutrition, immunocompromised state, and UV radiation. And parasitic keratitis, contact lens usage, swimming pools, and exposure to contaminated water is the risk factors for parasitic keratitis. So in the body, we have a natural defense mechanism. In the eye, we have a blinking mechanism. So we continuously blink our eyes. So this acts as a mechanical barrier for entry of pathogens or dust particles into the eye. And in the tear film also, we have a immunoglobulin IgA and some some enzymes like lysozyme and cool. Lysozyme also helps in preventing the infection. And because of cool surface, this also prevents the infections. So presence of intact corneal epithelium is healthy corneal epithelium is important to prevent the corneal ulcers. But most of the bacteria are not capable of producing corneal ulcer when the epithelium is intact. But there are 5 bacteria which can invade the intact corneal epithelium and may cause the corneal ulcers. So those bacteria, Neisseria gonorrhea, Corynebacterium diphtheria, Haemophilus, and Shigella, and Listeria monocytosis. These are the bacteria can penetrate the intact corneal epithelium. Normally, if there is an intact corneal epithelium, so pathogen will not enter into the cornea. But there are 5 bacteria which can enter the intact epithelium. So this is important. These 5 bacteria, you have to remember these 5 bacteria. That is Neisseria gonorrhea, Corynebacterium diphtheria, Haemophilus, Shigella, and Listeria. These bacteria can penetrate into the intact corneal epithelium and may cause corneal ulcers. Most of the other bacteria cannot enter into the corneal layers if there is no breach in the corneal epithelium, except these 5 bacteria. So what is the definition? I already said. It is a defect or discontinuation of the corneal epithelium associated with the inflammation, infiltration, and necrosis of the surrounding corneal tissue. So necrosis should be there, inflammation should be there, and there should be corneal epithelial defect. So this is the definition of the corneal ulcer. So these are the common bacteria which causes the corneal ulcer: Staphylococcal, Streptococcal, Pseudomonas, Klebsiella, Proteus, Moraxella, Nocardia, and atypical Mycobacterium. These are the common organisms which can cause corneal ulcers. In fungal, the common fungi are septate fungi like filament in the filaments fungi, septate and aseptate. Examples of septate fungi are Fusarium aspergillus and Penicillium, and aseptate are Mucor, Rhizopus, and yeast-like fungus like Candida, and dimorphic fungus like Histoplasma. So coming to pathogens of fungal corneal ulcer, unlike some bacteria, fungi can't invade the intact epithelium. So definitely there should be some trauma. If there is a fungal ulcer, there should be some trauma to the cornea with the vegetative matter. Vegetative matter is, what is vegetative matter? It is a tree branch or tree leaves or animal tail. So definitely there should be presence of trauma in case of fungal corneal ulcer. But whereas in some bacteria, the 5 bacteria, without any trauma or any defect in the epithelium, they can cause the corneal ulcer. Whereas in fungi, there should be definitely trauma with the vegetative matter is important. This you have to remember. In fungi, there should be trauma with the vegetative matter. So if there is intact epithelium, the fungi can't enter into the cornea. So definitely there should be some defect in the epithelium. Examples of viral corneal ulcer: herpes simplex and herpes zoster. These are the common examples. And decreased immunity is a triggering factor for the reactivation of the. Normally, these herpes simplex or zoster virus, they remain latent in the trigeminal ganglion. If there is any decrease in the immunity, they reactivate and may cause the viral corneal ulcers. In the parasitic keratitis, acanthamoeba is the main organism. So these are the different organisms which causing the infective corneal ulcers. That includes fungal, bacterial, viral, and parasitic. So this is all about infective keratitis. Coming to the non-infective keratitis, it is of 2 types. In the non-infective, immune mediated and immune mediated. Examples of non-immune mediated non-infective corneal ulcer in local causes like trauma, post-surgical, eyelid and that is adnexal diseases, and neurological, that is neurotropic and neuroparalytic. As I said, in the neurotropic there is a damage to the trigeminal nerve. This leads to loss of sensations of the cornea. And in case of neuroparalytic keratitis, there is a damage to the facial nerve that leads to incomplete closure. There is a paralysis of the orbicularis muscle that leads to incomplete closure of the eyelids. So as there is a continuous exposure to the outside environment, the cornea becomes dry, and that eventually leads to ulceration. And systemic causes are nutritional disorders and leukemia cancers. So what is this is neurotropic ulcer. There is a lesion in the trigeminal nerve, and thus because of that lesion, there is a loss of sensations of the cornea, and that leads to abnormal repair of the corneal epithelium. And that because of the disruption of the sensory and sympathetic pathway, cornea failed to resist the effects of trauma and desiccation. There is a loss of protective corneal reflex to the outside environment, and that leads to neurotropic corneal ulcers. Whereas in case of neuroparalytic ulcers, because of the facial nerve lesion, that leads to Bell's palsy. There is a paralysis of orbicularis oculi muscle, and the patient is unable to close the eyelid completely. The lower half of the cornea is exposed to outside environment, and eventually it will become dry and devitalized. And finally, it leads to neuroparalytic corneal ulcers. These come under non-immune mediated, non-infective corneal ulcers. And immune-mediated non-infective corneal ulcers examples are in the vernal keratoconjunctivitis. It is an allergic conjunctivitis. Here, this vernal keratoconjunctivitis is because of the hypersensitive reaction to the pollen grains and other outside atmospheric allergens mediated by the IgE. Here we see shield ulcers. The next example is marginal ulcer. Marginal ulcer, it is a peripheral ulcerative keratitis. That is, we see at the margins of the cornea. That is, at the periphery of the cornea, we see this marginal ulcer. It is due to immune reaction to the toxins produced by the Staphylococcus bacteria. It is common in, as it is immunological reaction, not because of the infective organism. The toxin, it is immunological reaction to the toxins of the Staphylococcus. So that's why it is come under immune-mediated non-infective ulcer. It is common in patients with pneumonitis and blepharitis, where this blepharitis is the common pathogen in the blepharitis is staph. So the toxins, there is an immunological reaction to the toxins of the staph, and that leads to marginal corneal ulcers. Next one is rodent ulcer or Murine ulcer. This ulcer is because of the autoimmunolysis of the epithelium by collagenollytic enzymes. There is increased levels of IgA and deficiency of the T suppressor cells. And post-surgical, that is after corneal transplantation, if there is any graft rejection, there is a chance of non-immune mediated corneal ulcers. So this is about systemic causes. Systemic causes are like autoimmune disorders like Sjogren's syndrome and primary keratoconjunctivitis sicca. And collagen vascular disorders like Stevens-Johnson's, rheumatoid arthritis, and SLE and Weber granulomas. These all come under systemic immune causes of corneal ulcers. So this is about infective corneal ulcers and non-infective corneal ulcers. In the infective corneal ulcers, the main organisms are bacteria, fungi, which come under suppurative type of corneal ulcers. That is, they cause abscess of the cornea. And viral and parasitic other infective causes of corneal ulcer. In the viral, herpes simplex and herpes zoster is common, and in parasitic, acanthamoeba is common. That is all about infective corneal ulcer. In non-infective corneal ulcer, it is of two types: non-immune mediated and immune mediated. In the non-immune mediated, the common examples are neurotropic and neuroparalytic ulcers. And in immune-mediated vernal keratoconjunctivitis, marginal ulcers, Murine ulcers, post-surgical, and systemic causes like connective tissue disorders, and lacrimal disorders like Sjogren's syndrome and keratoconjunctivitis sicca. So this is about different different risk factors and the causes of infective and non-infective corneal ulcers. So coming to the pathology of the corneal ulcer, there are 4 stages are there in the pathology of corneal ulcer. The first stage is stage of progressive infiltration. The second stage is stage of active ulceration. And third stage is stage of regression and stage of cicatrization. So in the first stage, after damage to the corneal epithelium, the bacteria or fungi enters into the corneal layers. So after entry and adherence of organisms, through the breached epithelium, so host defense mechanism activates. As there is a foreign particle, bacteria is a foreign particle. As it enters into the corneal layers, as it is a foreign particle, the host defense mechanism activates and releases the polymorpho neutrophils and lymphocytes. So inflammatory cells enter into the corneal layers to prevent the to decrease the effect of foreign particle, that is bacteria. These polymorpho neutrophils and lymphocytes infiltrate into the stroma and epithelium. So what happens as the infective organism which entered into the corneal layer multiplies and releases the toxins and enzymes. So basically, after any corneal epithelial breach, this organism enter into the corneal stroma. As the organism is entered, the inflammatory cells also entered as a part of host defense mechanism. The inflammatory cells also enter, and the bacteria multiplies and releases the toxins and enzymes. So in this flowchart, we can see normal epithelium. There is a disruption of the barrier by any risk factor I mentioned earlier. And defective epithelium. Bacteria in the cell membrane, the bacteria has a part called glycocalyx. With this, it adherent to the defective epithelium and multiplies. There is infiltration of acute inflammatory cells, and finally, 5 minutes. Okay. Because of the infiltration of the acute inflammatory cells, there is and eventually because of the released toxins and enzymes, there is a necrosis of the corneal tissue. This necrosis is by toxins and enzymes of the infective pathogen. So this is the stage of progressive infiltration. Here there is an entry of bacteria into the corneal stroma, activation of host defense mechanism, and the multiplication of the organism and release of toxins and enzymes, and eventually necrosis of the corneal tissue. So in the pathology of corneal ulcer, stage of progressive infiltration is the first step. This is followed by stage of active ulceration. As there is a continuous release of toxins and enzymes by the pathogen, there is a necrosis and sloughtening of the epithelium, Bowman's membrane, and involved stroma, and the walls of the ulcer projects owing to the swelling of the lamella by imbibition of fluid. As there is a damage to the epithelium, so that itself leads to entry of fluid into the corneal layers, because the epithelium acts as a barrier of entry of fluid into the corneal layers. As there is a damage to the epithelium, there is entry of fluid into the corneal layers, and because of the toxins and enzymes, there is a necrosis of the corneal tissue and the walls of the ulcers. This is the wall. This is the cornea tissue. This is the epithelium and stroma and endothelium. In the ulcer, there is a breach in the epithelium, inflammation, and necrosis of the corneal tissue. These are the walls of the ulcer. They are swollen because of the imbibition of fluid into the ulcer walls. We see a swollen walls, and there is a hyperemia of the circumcorneal vessels, resulting in, because of the toxins and enzymes of the bacteria, that leads to dilatation of the circumcorneal vessels, and we see congestion. And along with the hyperemia and dilatation of the circumcorneal vessels, the iris and ciliary body vessels also dilate. And because of the dilatation, as an inflammatory process, there is an exudation of fluid into the anterior chamber, and that leads to formation of the hypopyon. Hypopyon is nothing but the pus in the anterior chamber. So basically, because of the released toxins and enzymes, there is a necrosis of the corneal tissue, and there is a imbibition of fluid into the ulcer walls, and there is a hyperemia, that is dilatation of the circumcorneal vessels, and there is a dilatation of the iris and ciliary body vessels. Because of the dilatation of the iris and ciliary body vessels, there is a leakage of, there is a exudation of the different proteins and pus cells into the anterior chamber. That leads to formation of the hypopyon. Hypopyon is nothing but the presence of pus in the anterior chamber. So in the pathology, the main anti-inflammatory, the inflammatory cells like leukocytes, pro-inflammatory cytokines, metalloproteinases, and these are released to as a host defense mechanism. These are released, and this leads to tissue destruction. There's a fight between the pathogen and the inflammatory cells that with the cost of damage to the corneal transparency. So next stage is stage of regression. Here because of the natural host defense mechanism and because of the antimicrobial treatment we start, there is a line of demarcation forms around the ulcer, which contains of leukocytes, phagocytes, and the organism, that pathogen, and the necrotic debris. Here, because of the natural host defense mechanism, in this stage we see because of natural host defense mechanism and antimicrobial treatment, we see a line of demarcation. The ulcer become enlarged. In this stage, the size of the ulcer increases because of the digestion of the necrotic material by leukocytes and phagocytes. And there is as the digression starts, there is a decreased infiltration and swelling of the corneal walls, and margins and floor become smooth. Because of the host defense mechanism, the regression starts. And in the previous stage, as I said, there is a swelling of the ulcer walls. Here, because of the phagocytes and neutrophils, the margins and floor become smooth. So and vascularization starts. As a host defense mechanism, the new blood vessels enter into the cornea, and these vessels helps in restoring the lost tissue and the supply of the antibodies. And next stage is stage of cicatrization. Here, after regression, cicatrization is nothing but the scarring of the cornea. Scarring means opacity. Because of the healing by epithelialization, a new fibrous tissue is laid down by keratocytes. The main function of the keratocytes is repairing of the damaged tissue. This fibrous tissue is laid down by fibroblasts and endothelium of the new blood vessels. As I said, the new blood vessels enter into the corneal layers. They help in restoring the lost tissue by formation of the scar tissue. The stroma thickens and pushes the epithelium anteriorly. There are different degrees of scarring. The only epithelium is involved, it regenerates without any scar formation. If there is any damage to the Bowman's membrane, if only Bowman's membrane is involved, it leads to a scarring called nebula. This is a superficial scarring. This we call it as a nebula. If the 1/3 of the stroma is involved, that we call it as a macula. And if it is more than 1/3 of the stroma is involved, we call it as a leucoma. So these are the different this picture showing the opacities of the cornea. Here we see a thick opacity that involving the more than 1/3 of the stroma. We call it as a leucomatous cornea, leucomatous opacity. This is a superficial opacity. We call it as a nebula. Here only Bowman's membrane is involved. Here it is a mixed type. We see superficial stroma is also involved along with the Bowman's membrane. We call it as a macula. So these are different types of corneal opacities. Okay. So basically, in the stage of progressive infiltration, we see adherence of the organism and resultant destruction and necrosis of the involved tissue. In stage of active ulceration, we see necrosis, sloughing, and margin and floor show gray infiltration and sloughing. In stage of regression, because of natural host immunity, there is a decreased signs and symptoms. Infiltration decreases, and superficial vascularization occur, and ulcer healing starts at this stage. In the last stage, because of that we call it the stage of cicatrization, the necrotic stroma is replaced by a scar tissue, and the vessels regress completely, and they appear as a ghost vessels after complete healing of the corneal ulcers. So these are the pictures of stage of progressive infiltration. We see necrosis and sloughing of the corneal tissue. In the stage of active ulceration, we see the swelling of the walls of the corneal ulcer because of the imbibition of the fluid. And the stage of regression, we see that ulcer size has increased, but the swollen walls are decreased. This we call it the stage of regression. This is the stage of cicatrization, where there is a complete healing of the corneal ulcer and formation of the scar. So I will conclude today. In the next class, I will deal with the clinical features and treatment of the corneal ulcers. Thank you.
Ya,